Okay, we see we're approaching 12 o'clock, so call the meeting in order. At 12 o'clock, roll call, please.
Board Member Munoz. Board Member Calendar.
Here.
Board Member Shim. Board Member Mazgai.
Here.
And Chair Larry Hara.
Here. Welcome to the June Historic Resources Board meeting, and would have staff introduction at this time.
Bianca Arizmendi, Committee Outreach Assistant.
Yesenia Segovia, Assistant Planner.
Hello there, Christy Hopper. I'm the new Assistant Director for Community Development.
And Grant Leonard, Planning Manager.
Thank you. Right now, we're open for general public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Let's go to the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from May 5th, 2025. It was in your agenda packet. Is there any corrections or additions to the minutes of May 5th? Thank you.
I have a couple. So for the certificate appreciation nominees, the full name for the nominee for 14 Los Sorellas is Eric Michael Winkoff. And I think in the minutes it just says Eric Michael.
Any other questions or comments about the minutes?
And the second correction is for the nominee for Monterey County Historical Society, the full name is the Monterey County Historical Society, not Monterey Historical Society.
Thank you. Any other corrections or additions? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes from May 25th?
So moved.
So moved by Board Member Munoz. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Board Member Shin seconds. Is there any, is there any other discussion at this time for the motion to approve the minutes as corrected? If not, could we have roll call, please?
Board Member Munoz.
Yes.
Board Member Calendar. Board Member Shim.
Present.
Board Member Mazgai.
Approved.
Chair Hara.
Yes, approved. Thank you. Minutes are approved. So we'll go on to the consideration. Do you have the PowerPoint? Okay. This is one of the, I wanted to do a presentation about the tour I took at the Sacramento Chinatown before the presentation that we made. We'll talk a little bit about the presentation, Grant and I think that's the last one. But we met on, I think it's on J Street near the Old Town, and this is the Foon Gate looking up. So this is about, we're standing at the ground level of the Chinatown in Sacramento, and it's looking up to the street level, and that's all fill. In other words, originally that was a swampy area, so we were standing at the original level of Chinatown. Next slide. And so there's a lot of two-story buildings there, and at the first floor, it's kind of a recessed, and the idea was in the 60s to make it into a pedestrian mall. And so a lot of these buildings were put together by associations and other entities. Next slide. There was this museum from the history of the Republic of Chinatown. The museum was not about Sacramento Chinatown, though. It was mainly about the beginning of this particular person who was known as the founder of the Republic of China. Next. And this is the outside of the building. There's a lot of brownstone, brick buildings like that, two-story. Next. And this is a rather large, impressive building. This is Su Yin Benevolent Association, and a lot of the buildings were built by benevolent associations or family associations, so they actually went out across the United States and procured funding to build these. And some of these buildings originally were, this is at street level, and they were intended to be a tourist attraction or Chinatown. So, and they're also trying to develop some businesses there. And there was one I didn't take a picture of it. There was a large 2-story building that was a Chinese restaurant. Next slide. And the only one that was left is this, and as a part of this building on the first floor was a Thai restaurant, but they raised a lot of funding. Next slide. So this is a shot of the Confucius Church. There's two slides there, or 2 pictures, and it's a 3-story building, and it was built in the 60s, like a lot of the buildings there, and it was funded through Confucius membership. $7 million. Wow. And so I think the intent was to rediscover or rebuild Chinatown and show how probably the progress or the wealth that the Chinese had at that time in the 60s. But you can see now that that's really not too, it's probably not inhabitable for renting. You can see the weeds growing in the staircase right there. So it is the largest Confucius membership in the United States, and also probably one of the largest buildings, but very, very much underutilized. Next slide. And so this is a 3-story building, the Bing Kong Tong, and it's still operating, but it's a fraternal organization. And so you walk down to you begin to walk down to the street to the pedestrian mall. Next slide. I thought I was going to this conference, and next to this apartment, maybe can you make that a little larger? Anyway, this is some of the work that they did in Sacramento. They've got the Madstone Apartments, who rehabilitized it, and it's also part of the landmark of Sacramento. So they have these nice, just an idea, they have these very nice plaques that are put on these historic buildings. Next slide. So I took this one because this shows the Travelers Hotel. It's registered under the National Registry of Historic Places, so I'm not sure who put this particular sign up, but it's also a very nice plaque. So it might give us some ideas, but maybe some of the things that we might be able to do. These are probably they're probably fairly expensive as well. Next slide. So one of that last one we talked, given the presentation, we had one picture. Maybe you didn't get that in there. Oh, okay, that's fine. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe the bottom line of the Chinatown tour my takeaway was, in the 60s, that was maybe a popular idea to have pedestrian malls, but right now I would say that that's not a successful model to be utilized, and they had some, there's a lot of vacancies there, there's a lot of underutilized buildings, so it was sort of unfortunate, but on the one hand, it certainly shows that, and it's fairly close to a large parking facility. And still, I think that was one of the problems of the success of Better Chinatown, was trying to make it a destination, and there was no parking. Although it is close to Old Town, which is a tourist destination spot. And then Grant, myself, and TEF gave a presentation. A lot of it was taken up from the PowerPoint that they used for the 3438 Soledad Street design workshop. But I think it was unique, and what we did was it was about beginning design as opposed to many of the reports at the Historic Preservation Conference was things that, report back of things that already been accomplished or done. So that's, any other comments about the report, presentation?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It was very well received. Folks were interested to see us, this early in the process and being this focused on working the existing building into the redevelopment plans. And a lot of interesting discussion about at what point do you just honor the existing building with the new plans versus trying to actually preserve what's there? At what point do you accept that demolition might be needed, but you still incorporate the important elements into the new building?
I think they were also, there was a lot of, I think, feedback that the community input part was kind of unique and also very most favorable. Any questions about Sacramento Chinatown or the Reservation Foundation presentation?
So what's going to happen with these partially derelict buildings and the ones that are used seem to be private associations? So I didn't see much history. I didn't see much historical architecture here. So was it primarily raised and then all recreated in the 60s?
Right, it was like a redesign or recreation of a Chinatown with the intent of making it a, quote, destination.
So the Travelers Hotel, even though we have the nice plaque saying Mission Revival, I was looking for a building like that and didn't see it. Is it there or is it?
Yes.
It is there, okay.
I didn't take a wide-angle shot of it. It was-
Online then and see it that way, good. So that's, one can actually see that when you're in the Chinatown, this Chinatown.
No, it was probably closer to the convention center or conference center. But I was walking to the presentation and I saw that, so I took a picture of it.
Okay.
Was there any feedback from anybody in regards to the Chinatown project?
I think the only feedback I received personally was from Doug Tom, and he says, it's an example of what not to do. So I think from a historic perspective, it was recreated, so it probably isn't as historic as maybe what we have in our particular location. And so, they kind of went through a revitalization plan, and then they came upon a plan, and it was not as successful, in my opinion.
So Larry, were there historic buildings here used by Asian Americans and they were derelict, so the thought was, let's get rid of them all and start all over? Or was this a brand-new area?
I think that was the original site of Chinatown, and they were kind of proud to say that, well, it was right near the Union Pacific Railroad Station, but it's much lower, and it shows how much fill there was in the particular area, because it's a pretty swampy area right there around Sacramento. So, yeah, that was the site of the original Chinatown. I didn't take a picture of it, but if you take up I-5 heading north through Sacramento, off to your right, just near the Golden One Center, you see this tall pagoda-looking apartment building. That's part of it also. But that was a shot of our presentation. So in the background, you can see the Confucius Church. But I thought it was well-received and the audience was very much engaged in trying to listen to what we were trying to do.
So do they have any plans of kind of like revitalizing, or do they have any pictures of the buildings that were there before the attempt to kind of, I don't know, build something?
I think the main purpose behind the tour was to show what the history of the Chinatown area was and is, and how did they get to that point. And it's really not so much historic preservation as it was the story of China, how they try to save Chinatown, and it was up to the individuals to decide what the outcome was.
But they didn't have any pictures like of what it was before, did they? Or,
No, not really. It would be very typical. I mean, Sacramento was probably one of the largest Chinese populations in the West Coast at the time, especially right after the gold rush and the end of the Transcontinental Railroad. Okay, anything else? Well, thank you very much. And let's go on to other business. The, do you have Chinatown presentation? Is that in there, or is that the minutes?
So next up in other business is an update on 3438 Soledad Street. And we can just scroll to the next page on the agenda. So the status is we're working with the Public Works Department now on preparing a scope of work for demolition and preservation services. We've spent some time looking at whether or not preserving the front wall would be feasible while demolishing the rest of the building, and the conclusion from our friends in the engineering and building world is that that's really not. So it's a matter of recovering the materials from the front, documenting it as much as possible, and then incorporating that into the new design. So at this point, we're getting some contracts ready for environmental testing and preparing scope of work for that services.
Is there any way that we can get any feedback about that? I'm just kind of curious because it'd be almost like is there a second opinion?
Yeah, definitely. I can report back again next month, or if you have any specific requests, we can send them to me by email, and then I'll work with our Public Works and Building Department on it.
Yeah, it was sort of like we got the diagnosis, but maybe we'd like to see maybe a different approach.
Of course.
So, because right now it sounds like it's tending toward demolition with with the preservation of the front facade.
Recovery of the historically relevant material to be incorporated in the new design.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question about, is the 34 to 38, is that all on the one side, the pool hall? So this isn't going to be included of the Republic Cafe, is it? Oh.
I think 34 is where the PI Market was, then it goes.
Yeah, Market, the pool hall, and the Shell station.
So all of those buildings will be,
Well, that's part of the design when they put together three-story building, four-story.
So Grant, if it is demolished, to make sure I understand what you're saying, the east facade elements that are noteworthy will be removed and retained and somehow used, incorporated in the new building's east facade. Okay.
Any other questions about 3438 Soledad Street? Okay, going on to the next item. Grant?
So the audit and flagging of our historic resources in our permits system. Yesenia has started that process, and we're working through the list one by one, checking off each address. One interesting development we identified is that the property has to be flagged twice in our system, because the system is searchable both by your parcel number, your APN, but also your address. And flagging it on one doesn't necessarily flag it on the other. So it's a matter of a little bit of redundancy in there as we go through and make sure that it's flagged both ways.
Well, for instance, the Republic Cafe has two addresses, but one APN. I'm not sure why it's that way, but I know that's the way it is.
So in the future, both criteria will be used for flagging? And when do we expect that to be completed?
Yesenia, what do you think? You have an estimate for us?
This month or early next month?
Next month?
Yeah.
Okay. And how will we, as HRB, or even the public, know then? I mean, when we go on, where do we go to know this, to educate us? Or is this intended to be just in-house and the public doesn't know? So if I own a building, I have no clue unless I try to do a permit of some type.
So this is for our internal software, so it's mainly so our staff recognize that it's a historic property. We do have the list of the historic properties on our website. And then with the updated survey we're doing, we're planning a more robust web page to have all those geolocated on a map so people can find it more easily as a member of the public.
Any other questions about the flagging of historic resources? Thank you, Grant. And the historic context statement from the survey?
Correct. So following last month's HRB, we had a public meeting right here in the rotunda for our context statement, and had about 20 or so members of the public come out, including some board members here, and gathered some good public input on the survey and the context statement. And we also have digitized their handout, which is a 8 or 10 question survey, and we're going to be posting that on our webpage. We've updated it, and I'll send out the links for that. And then we've received an admin draft of the historic context statement, and we're in the process of reviewing that and getting comments back to the page in Turnbull.
So the final historic context statement will be published when?
We'll have a draft for the public this summer.
So that doesn't require our approval, does it? I don't think, I wouldn't think so, but I'm
No,
just.
not for approval, but we'll bring it to you during the review period so you can have a presentation on it and review it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions about the historic context statement?
Yeah, so is the historic context statement, is that for the entire city of Salinas?
Correct.
So embedded in that, I'm thinking that there's going to be sub-context statements for each one that is a historic resource, is that right?
So the historic context statement is sort of a mini history of the city of Salinas, and so it's broken down by different time periods and architectural periods. And then later on, there's the actual survey of historic properties, and then each property that's deemed to be historic has a write-up for it. But they're two separate items.
I think one of the questions that the board had originally was whether or not they will be doing district designations or recommendations about that. Is that's not part of the historic context statement, is my understanding, is like an overview of the history of Salinas.
Correct, yeah, the historic concept, that's exactly right, and then it's helped to use, it's helpful for staff to use that to make determinations about why something's historic and why it's significant. And so it's a companion piece to the survey.
But I hope they are including districts, areas in Salinas that will be, might be color-coded by when they were developed or what styles are there. So we can then use that information. A number of cities have already done this. If you look at Pacific Groves, if you look at Riverside, you know, I can name others, where they've already included this, and they then, and you see a map, and you have the proposed names or already the existing names, and some of the districts are already official, others are should be, or others are tentative, so they kind of rank them. So I'm hoping that with their expertise, they would be the ones qualified to do that, and then with the information, we then can carry that and create what we feel is important to educate and inform the rest of us.
That's exactly right. That's within their scope of work, so very good.
As the original historical statements in the late 1980s, they identified some historical districts, just like that one identified for the Steinbeck, for the Steinbeck, all of the buildings that he grew or did something. And then we would like to see, because there are areas downtown that has prominent homes of different styles, especially the Victorian that we can see on the east side of the city, and also on our area on the Steinbeck Center. I mean, the Steinbeck House. There's a lot of historical Victorian homes that could be done as a district, and can identify other places such as that.
Right. In the 89 survey, we see the beginning of the districts, and none of which became official, but the maps need to be increased because it's more limited what streets and what area are included, or maybe a new district or new suggested district with its name for whatever reason, whether it's the architecture or people that live there or what, but that's, again, I'm hoping Page and Turnbull, that's what we've commissioned them to do for us.
Any other questions about the historic survey? Okay, certificates of appreciation.
Correct. So Yesenia's been hard at work formatting them, getting the ones that are individualized, and we ran out of very nice paper. So we didn't want to print it on just regular old white office paper, so we put in an order for some nice cardstock, and that's the logistics side of running a program like this. So we're waiting on the paper, and then we'll have them printed, and we'll get the signatures from our chair and also our mayor. And then the plan is to coordinate with the recipients on how they want to receive it. If they come into the office and pick it up or have it mailed to them, we'll work with them on what works best.
If nothing else, will it be announced at a city council meeting? Or listed, at least listed? Maybe, I think probably announced would be preferable.
Yeah, I agree. That had been our plan for the meeting on 5/13, and ended up being one of 3 proclamations, and ours was a little rushed, so we didn't quite get to do the presentation we hoped, but certainly at a future meeting, I hope to get it the recognition.
Yeah, that should be right at the front, like, pretty easy to do, like a proclamation of sorts. Okay. So we'll try to get it coordinated that, people will be informed that they're being presented, and maybe if they want, they could stand or be present.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So in with that topic, I guess there's enough time to try to coordinate if these certificates are ready. This Saturday, aren't we having a big Salinas History Day at the Welcome Center? So there's no way to tie it in with that, huh?
No, I don't think we'll have the certificates ready by then. It's also a little late to organize some sort of ceremony at that event, but that's an excellent reminder that we are having a Salinas Day this Saturday, June 7th.
It's going to be at the Steinbeck Center and the Welcome Center both?
Uh-huh.
That's what I thought. Okay. And a CPF membership, confirmation about that.
Confirmation, we have our invoice. We are just getting it processed, and once that check is cut, we'll be certified members of the California Preservation Foundation.
And you'll have the membership number, or membership ID, so we can, if we want to utilize it for website or webinar things.
Correct. We went for the government nonprofit registration for up to 10 members. So that's the 7 HRB members as well as some staff. And that includes several perks, including a couple of tickets to the annual conference and access to their library of 300 recordings already, plus their regular or periodic trainings that they schedule that you can sign up for in advance. So we'll have all that.
Okay, very good.
So I'm unclear. So when can we start using this?
Once we pay the invoice. So I'll follow up with an email once we have our registration.
Yeah.
You have the invoice, though.
We do.
Okay. Before we go into the future agenda items, I did know that, excuse me, your name again, please?
My name is Christy Hopper, so
Okay. Could you
And-
maybe do maybe a self-introduction or
A
bio?
little bit, sure, I'd love to. I started with this city last Tuesday, actually, so it's been kind of a whirlwind. Got 4 days under my belt. My background actually is in historic preservation. I have both my undergraduate and graduate degrees in historic preservation from the Savannah College of Art and Design. Worked as a historic preservation consultant. Actually, Kent Seavey, who did the 89 survey, was a good friend of mine, so got very involved in the preservation community here on the Monterey Peninsula. So, and then then I got into current planning, planner by profession, and then over the past several years got up into the directorship. So my most recent, I came from the city of Hollister. I live, in Prunedale, so I'm local. And really excited to be here with the city. So a lot of really good things that are going on. Really excited about what Grant and the staff have been doing with the Historic Resources Board. So looking forward to kind of lending my expertise. And really, I'm excited about the historic context statement. A lot of jurisdictions don't ever get to do a citywide historic context statement, so it's going to be pretty exciting. So I'm in the process of reviewing that as well.
Welcome. Any questions or comments from the board?
So I didn't, what is your title, or what do you do?
I'm the Assistant Community Development Director.
Community
Yeah.
development, okay.
So I will be in charge right now of all current planning and working with advanced planning and project implementation for now until we're fully staffed up, and then we'll look at some roles and responsibilities of the directors in the department.
Thanks.
Great.
Oh, and if I may, you might want to just touch on your experience at Monterey and the historic resources there and
Right. So I've worked now for the city of Monterey. I was there for 8 years, from 08 to 16, and then went to the city of Marina for 6 years, and then the city of Hollister, and now I'm here in Salinas. Before I was working for the city of Monterey, I was, like I said, I was a historic preservation consultant. I wrote the Oak Grove historic context statement for the city, as well as doing a lot of historic resource evaluations and, just evaluations on appropriateness, a lot of adaptive reuse. One of my favorite projects, and it was one of my last projects when I was in Monterey, was the adaptive reuse of the Cooper Malera adobe. So going from, a museum to now the event center that it is. So that was very exciting, a lot of education in the community on that. So very, very involved, especially in the city of Monterey, and I'm super excited about the preservation efforts that are going to be happening here in Salinas.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much and welcome. So let's talk about future agenda items. So the election of officers, which is a topic near and dear to my heart.
That's correct. Per our bylaws in this code, we are to elect officers on the first meeting after the first Monday in July, so that'll be our July meeting. And last year you had mentioned you were going to continue for 1 year as chair, but weren't necessarily interested in continuing again after that. So there'll be a topic of discussion for the board on who assumes chair and vice chair.
Yep, I didn't read the bylaws or our, whatever our charter is, but I don't think it states that there's a nominating committee, but I think at this point in time, I think it would be appropriate to maybe come up with a chairman, vice chair, so that we can vote on it, publicly state it at this meeting, approve that, and then vote on it next.
Well, we won't take any votes today because it's
Right.
not an agendized item, but you're free to have a discussion about it now.
Yeah. So I stated that I wish not to continue as chair, but I'll continue on the board. So at this time, is there any, it's usually appropriate to have the vice chair become the chairman. So probably first ask Michael, would you be willing to become chairman?
Sure.
Is there any other comments from the board at this time?
No.
So now we'd like to have a vice chair in case Michael can't be here at all times. Is there any volunteers to be vice chair? Eloise volunteers to be vice chair. Is there any other volunteers or nominees? Seeing none, we'll make that an agenda item, and then we'll vote on it at the next meeting. Thank you very much. And there's a couple of things, of the rehab rights guidance that Michael brought up the last time, so.
Correct, yeah, so I wanted to acknowledge that. We'll have that on a future agenda. Also want to spend some time looking at other cities. You provided one example. I want to see if there are other examples from across the state or the nation that we can pull in and have for reference for our discussion.
Just to give a little more background on that, I have been in communication with the city of Oakland and asking them about it. And Betty Marvin, who's been very friendly and welcoming, is appreciative that we see value in it, even though it was done ages ago. They're comfortable in our using that as a link, especially if it's the full link to and giving them credit. If for some reason we would want to cite particular examples or information, then she suggested that we also cite where that came from and that. But as long as the city of Oakland's link is given and given credit for it, they have no problem with our using that. And I assume everyone has that link, or otherwise, should I email it to people, or how can we all see it without getting complicated by more than 3 people being connected?
Correct, we'll send it out as we do, so everyone will have it, but there'll be no accidental chain conversations.
I'm not sure if it's a future agenda item, but Eloise brought something forward, so you might make a comment about it. It's not an agenda item, but maybe we can create some information about that.
I brought that because the librarian, the reference librarian at Steinbeck gave it to me, and I've just been reading it, and since I've been on the board, it's a book that I've read and referenced more than many other things that I've read. And I think it might be good to have it in our own library here, if we have one. Maybe a few different copies so that it can be available to the board members and also the staff, because really it's a very detailed book about all the different styles of American houses going back to, I don't know, from the beginning, actually. And it's a lot of detailed information so that you yourself can determine by looking at these different buildings in the neighborhoods what style it would be based on the knowledge of the roofs and the windows and just, you know, all the different features, detailed features. So I think it would be really good for us to have it.
As reference material?
I think so. And, yeah, it's a lot of really detailed information about the different styles. I've just noticed that since I've been doing my walks on Central Avenue, that since I've been reading it, I'm looking at all the different buildings, historic buildings on Central Avenue, and, you know, looking to see what style they are, or combination of styles based on this information, so.
Yeah, I think it's a great resource, and what I hope, one of the outcomes of the new survey is I through guidance and our input, we will create walking tours of the different neighborhoods and districts. It'll just be a reference, self-guided, and you just, oh, that's what it is, and you just keep following it. Because right now, we really don't have anything, especially online, we don't have anything like that.
Isn't there supposedly some kind of a card that they're going to be filling out for the historic survey, and there's certain information that's supposed to be relevant relative to something like this? I mean, this is not the guide, but they must have some sort of a guide that they use.
Absolutely. So our historic survey is definitely looking at that. And then as staff members, we'll be sure to look up A Field Guide to the American Houses by Virginia Savage McAllister. And we'll see about getting a copy for reference.
One piece of information that was really enlightening, illuminating to me was that 80% of all the housing was built in the United States was built after World War II. So that means that 20% is like before World War II. So that just, for me, I thought, you know, all those houses built before World War II, before 1940, are really very rare, you know, because it's only 20% of all the housing.
Well, from a Salinas perspective, it's unique because in the 20s and 30s, Salinas' per capita income was so high that they built probably more substantial buildings than they did in other areas. So they were able to build, you know, large, hopefully well-built buildings, and they still exist today. So I think we're unique in that regard, going back to the history of the 20s and 30s where there was a lot of money in Salinas.
Yes.
We was one of the richest.
And many of those buildings were built with the redwood, which is, you know, now they don't build buildings with redwood anymore. So it just tells you how, you know, we want to preserve these buildings that have these kinds of very rare woods and not just demolish them.
Yes.
As per the 1989 historical survey, it has in the beginning a background of the typical Salinas historical buildings. It gives you all of the features just like in the book, and the more comprehensive report that is underway right now, I take they will include, you know, more specific and more detailed background on the styles that are prominent in Salinas. Yep.
That's correct. Anything else?
That's it.
Any other suggestions or addition to the future agenda items at this time? And so I see the next meeting is July the 7th. That's the Monday after the 4th of July weekend, so.
Yeah.
The 4th of July is on Friday,
Correct.
so it's a 3-day weekend, sort of. Okay? July 7th, we're still having a meeting July 7th, Monday.
Okay.
So I think that's on our schedule for the entire year, so that's why we stayed with it.
Okay. Great.
But we moved the time of the last meeting to accommodate myself, so I appreciate that, but we're going to stay at the same time at noon on Monday. Any other business coming before the board at this time? Historic Resources Board? If not, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.